All right. So, hey, the clock went away. So somebody tell me when I'm running out of time.
We can hear you.
Oh, you're on mute. So we spent 2 years of being on mute, and I really appreciate Bill's last presentation, because so many of those lessons just really ring true. Also thank Major Kane. Major Kane sat down right next to me. He showed up at like the last Military Cyber Professional Association chapter meeting I'm the president of, and we're going to start having those things again. So we're really excited about that. One of my former students, Colonel Rydell, is I think the next contestant on this particular panel. But hey, I'm just going to jump right into it. And so, hey, I'll give you the bottom line up front. I'm advocating that we need a cyber force in the Department of Defense, a separate uniformed cyber service, and a cyber corps in the Department of Homeland Security. Very similar to the Coast Guard type mission. So I'm giving the bottom line up front. I was going to lead you through with a building of suspense as I went through it, but then I changed the title right at the last second, because I just wanted to put it out there, because I want this to be a discussion, right? I'm a professor. This is what I've been doing for a while. I like this. It's a perfect seminar room, right? So please, I'm not going to say hold your questions yet. If you got a question, you got a comment, you think what I said is absolutely stupid, just wave your hands like this, old signal wigwam, wigwag format, and we'll get the message through. Why do I say CIC, my college, College of Information and Cyberspace, America's Cyber War College? 2 years ago, what was the status of that college? We've been eliminated on the chopping block. And I'll submit to you that we're one rogue admiral or general away on the joint staff, or as the president of the National Defense University, from just deciding they should be eliminated and redistribute these professors to teach, logistics at the Eisenhower School, or history and strategy at the National War College. Because that's, in fact, where we were 2 years ago. And so who stepped in? Anybody know? Speaker, one of our opening speakers. Congressman Langevin basically said, thou shalt not put language in the 2021 NDAA that basically said, you're not going to get rid of us. And how do they punish an organization? By making them write reports, and they're not going to be able to spend most of their funding until they write reports and satisfactorily answer all these questions. But that's what it took. And what I'm saying here is they might attempt to do the same thing. Like, if they can get rid of it quick enough, then there's not really enough time for Congress to act to, put something in to stop them. Oh, well, sorry, we got rid of it last week. It's gone. We redistributed all the resources of professors. Now, how much do you think they were going to save? Here it is. We had a new priorities in the Department of Defense and all this sort of stuff. The Secretary of Defense was famously looking for billions of dollars to save. They said if they eliminated CIC, they could save almost $10 million over 3 years. And for that, because why? A lot of what we did was reimbursable, right? Or at least some of it. And so, but that's how sort of, in my view, maybe petty it was. Anyway, let's get right into it. So I'm a professor, we're in class. Let's talk about some recent cyber lessons. Have we had any recent cyber lessons?
Colonial Pipeline?
What's that?
Colonial Pipeline, a young major said, I told you so.
Colonial Pipeline, a young major. Were you the young major?
Yeah.
Yeah. So tell us the story.
At the time, my dad worked for DOT, and his department was responsible for pipeline transport.
Yeah.
And I looked at it, Dad, you realize you got some critical points of failure. He said, we're diverse enough, it'll never happen.
So this is.
I enjoyed that phone call. I said, son, you're right.
such a good story. And, you know, we can all tell stories like this. You know, my father had a pacemaker, right? So he got a pacemaker. And, you know, my mother's telling me, oh, yeah, it communicates back to the doc, da 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 da. And I said, is it secure?
Nope.
Oh, well, it's not like it's on the internet. And I'm like, yeah, how do you think the data's getting there? But, you know, I mean, and, you know, she belongs to AARP, and so she knows not to take the phone calls from the Nigerian prince, right? But still, what do you know that people don't even imagine, especially in the operational technology side, right? In the Internet of Things, the Internet of Medical Things, the Internet of Energy Things, all the things we don't know. We do a terrible enough job just on the regular old IT. Any other lessons we had recently?
Personal cell phones and war zones.
Yeah, so I got here, you know, I kind of went back and forth on putting a picture of Putin in my presentation, but I figured if I put him opposite Zelensky, it would be okay. Because, wow, what a contrasting study in leadership styles, right? Truly, truly amazing. I mean, the Ukrainian president staying there, you know, pretty much that leadership contributed greatly. Anybody go to the China metaverse thing? Talking about the China metaverse talk that was in here right before lunch. Pretty good, really good. Josh Bachman talked about, and he said something that I totally agree with. What is our greatest advantage? And I could say us as the United States, us, Western liberal democracy, free market thinking people, we have real friends. We have real friends. And I'd say that this right here, put an exclamation mark on that, right? Because, you know, it was just a couple of months ago when everybody thought that Russia had the second or third best army in the world. Right? And now they have like the second best army in Ukraine. Right? And why? Because they have friends. And this is the theme of our thing. You got to beat all of us. Whoops, you got to beat all of us to beat some of us or something. As I just tricked one of the box journals. What is it?
It's up there. You got to beat all of us.
To your left.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Beat one of us.
You got to beat all of us to beat one of us. Yeah, there it is. I knew it was around here somewhere. No, sorry, box of military cyber affairs. Hey, I got an article in here about basically the first cyber range ever. A 20-year sort of look back on this. Hey, the views expressed are my own, intended to stimulate discussion. So some people are very much supportive of some of the ideas I've got. Some people are very much dismissive of these ideas. I'll stipulate right now that the services are doing a good job with the cyber forces that they're creating. And the interagency is a lot better off than it was just a few years ago. The collaboration is a lot better. Who thinks there's work to do? Yeah, we've still got stovepipes and complexity, massive stovepipes and complexity, and lack of sharing, the kind of sharing that Chris Inglis talked about. So I thought when he was talking, I thought, hey, you know, he's agreeing with me. Now, I don't know if he's agreeing with me, but I thought he would. Speaking about space, I'm going to use some examples, and I'm going to use a lot of, I felt duty bound to include a lot of logos, looking at the HammerCon signs. So I got a lot of slides with logos that go into some history of some other organizations. Defense organizations and military services like the Coast Guard, who are military but not in the Department of Defense. So first let's talk about the Space Force. Okay, now who's surprised that we've got a Space Force before we got a Cyber Force? Okay, that surprised me, right? I mean, I get it. We could do a Space Force, and you know, the Army had a lot of people doing space stuff, ground terminals and missiles and stuff. The Air Force has been wanting to do space forever. And actually, an earlier version of this, I called it Cyber Force, Cyber Guard. But then, you know, the Space Force stole my guard. So anyway, So why is the Signal Corps on here? When was the Signal Corps created? Lyndon? 1860, Albert Meyer, an Army physician, thought up a way to do distance signaling with the flags. Basically did a lot of telegraphs signal. The U.S. Army Signal Corps laid thousands of miles of telegraph wires, pioneered at their lab in New Jersey, things like radar, wireless telegraph, FM radio, a whole bunch of stuff. What did Congress ask the Signal Corps to do about 10 years after they were created? They were asked by Congress to set up the Weather Service. So the entire current Weather Service and NOAA, who's ever heard of NOAA? What is NOAA?
One of the other uniform services. We know radios, so.
It is a uniformed service of the United States, but not a military service. How many officers, and this is going to be a little bit of my takeaway from objections I've had that we can do a cyber service. How many uniformed commissioned officers, because there's only uniformed commissioned officers, there's no enlisted or warrant in NOAA, how many do you think there are? More than 100? More than 1,000?
Less than 5,000.
321. 321. So if you can have I will say, if you can have a uniform service with 300, we heard from a bunch of colonels and captains this morning that each of our services have thousands and thousands of people who are trained in cyber. And then in 1903, Congress asked the Signal Corps to do what? Any ideas? Airplanes. To create a flying machine for war. Allocated $25,000 and gave it to the Signal Corps. And what did the Signal Corps do? Contracted with the Wright brothers. so the whole, and then that it stayed under the Signal Corps for many, many years. Finally, in 1918, it went to the Army Air Service, Army Air Corps, 1947, United States Air Force, and just last year, the Space Force. So what I'm saying is a lot of interesting heritage goes into some of our existing organizations that we can take advantage of, and they provide analogies. What happened in 1925 while it was still the Army Air Forces? Billy Mitchell, who's heard of Billy Mitchell?
Court Martial Billy Mitchell.
Court Martial Billy Mitchell.
We predict Pearl Harbor to date.
What did Billy Mitchell get court-martialed for?
He said that air power would be the dominant force and it could sink battleships.
Yeah, so
He also dropped the bomb on it, but custom-made bomb on the battleship.
he proved that there was something to this air power. So he was a staunch advocate of air power. Now he said it could be dominant all by itself. Okay, was that right?
No.
No, not right. So he wasn't 100% right, but he was a lot right. And the publicity, he wanted to be court-martialed because he was able to testify, in court, a lot of press that he thought this air power thing had a thing.
There's something the Japanese admiral who was sitting in the court martial.
Say again?
Especially the Japanese admiral who was sitting in the court martial.
There's so many stories. We could go down so many rabbit holes. But the important thing is, it was 20 years since Congress created or gave the Signal Corps some money to buy an aircraft. And somebody had a vision for where this would go. I'm going to submit to you that if the Air Force had stayed in the Army, maybe the way the doctrine and air power has developed would not be the same. Because why? What does the Army do?
It's a ground.
I'm a retired Army guy, right? West Point graduate, retired Army, and we're about massive formations of soldiers on the ground, supported with world-class logistics. Everything else is to support that, right? It just is. All forces, all of our services need, many of the different kinds of services. So now all the services have their own Air Force. Right? There's more aircraft in the Army than there is in the Air Force, right?
There are
Everybody
boats
knows.
in the Army than there is.
What's that?
There's more boats in the Army.
There's more boats. And when Congress decided that warrant officers would get commissioned, there's more commissioned boats in the Army than there is in the Navy. So, the Army's just a gigantic thing. But Billy Mitchell argued that without being autonomous, air power wasn't going to develop. And I think we're kind of there with our chosen field of what we like to do. And why do we like to do it? Because it's changing, because it's new, because it's dynamic. And this is a quick thing, I was going to bring it back to CIC. So we can't claim to go back to the Civil War, but we can claim to go back to 1964 with the Department of Defense Computer Institute. Who knows who the young lady over here is?
I know who.
Grace Hopper. She was actually on the faculty at the Department of Defense Computer Institute. DoD DOTC became ERMC. National Defense University was formed. It got sucked into National Defense University, which is there. Who knows who this is? Yeah, the Chancellor, Dr. Cassandra Lewis. Yeah, very good. She's our current Chancellor of the College of Information and Cyberspace. Congress decided that we should be renamed the College of Information and Cyberspace in the National Defense Authorization Act of 2016. Imagine, this probably contributed to their unhappiness with NDU and Joint Staff decided to get rid of us just a couple of years later. So yeah, it's and why? I'm not attributing bad motivations or bad intention to anyone who has these decisions. But what does everybody have when they're making decisions? They have priorities, perspectives, stakeholders, design considerations, whatever,
Lack of information.
Trade-offs.
Decision.
lack of understanding of the domain,
Funding.
right? Lack of funding. I mean, we always live in a constrained environment. So, when you're trying to balance things out and you maybe don't have an appreciation for what cyber can do, I mean, big Corps Marshal Billy Mitchell, right? Then that leads to decisions that might be suboptimal for the nation. Might be optimal for you with where you sit, but might be suboptimal, I submit. Hey, let's go to the Semper Paratus crowd. Who knows what Semper Paratus means?
Always ready.
Always ready. Are you a Coast team?
My grandpa was.
Oh, very good. And Coast Guard, when was the Coast Guard formed?
1790.
No. Yes. Yes. The Coast Guard was formed by Act of Congress in 1915. Their predecessor organizations, the Revenue Cutter Service, goes back to a Treasury organization in 1790. And the Lighthouse Service, they combined to form the Coast Guard Service. They got the Life-Saving Service. They got the motor, steam and motor vehicle inspection service, but they went into all these things. What's really neat about the Coast Guard?
Dual-headed.
They have fantastic authorities.
No posse comitatus.
No posse comitatus. Who knows what posse comitatus means? Davis.
Military on U.S. civilians.
Right. It's a law that says the Army cannot use the Army for civilian law enforcement.
They fall under DHS.
Well, and Coast Guard, yeah, they went from Treasury to what? Transportation to Homeland when Homeland was formed in 2003 after 9/11. So, yeah, so posse comitatus was a reaction against the Army being used to enforce laws after the Civil War, right? It applies by statute to the Army and derivatively to the Department of the Air Force, which came from the Army. It doesn't apply by statute to the Navy and the Marine Corps. It applies by DoD policy. But it does not apply to the Coast Guard. So the Coast Guard can do law enforcement. They can do military. They can do inspection. They can do safety. They can operate with the Navy. They can take their white-hulled fleet and do humanitarian missions that doesn't scare everybody because they're not showing up with gray-hulled vessels with big guns on them.
Just one little one.
Go ahead.
Just one little one.
That's just, they got some, but but it gives them a fantastic and broad range of capabilities. Now this next slide is going to be a little bit of stretch, but we're pretty much wrapping it up. Can I get a time hack from somebody?
153.
Okay, so I got about 5 minutes. Okay, perfect. And I appreciate the going back and forth. Now, who are these people? We know who these are, right? General Nakasone and Jen Easterly. So, respectively, the heads of the DoD Cyber Command and the Department of Homeland Security's CISA. Fantastic people. Why do I have the Department of the Post Office on here?
Because they're part of the IC community.
They're the oldest one in the nation.
Oh, very good. To my beautiful wife Maureen for pointing out that
I want the hammer.
I'm going to give her my hammer, which I just took apart. Hey, did anybody notice that this has a secret USB?
Yes.
So don't take this into the skiff. Is all I'm saying. Just be forewarned. But yeah, so when Ben Franklin set up the post office, was asked by the Continental Congress to set up the post office, appoint postmaster in 1773. It was only a short time later that what happened?
They were used as a spy service.
Well, mail fraud. Mail fraud. So the mails were being used for bad purposes. And so he established the Postal Inspection Service, which is the oldest federal law enforcement agency of the United States. And the first government organization devoted to protecting the information of citizens in the world. So kings and nobles, they could protect their information. The government will protect it. Regular people, nope. No expectation of privacy in the mail. So this is a really important point. I would submit to you that if we set up a cyber corps and a cyber force, we could put 1775 in their logo, like the Coast Guard put 1790 in their logo. And so these are crazy, stupid logos, and I tried to give you a safe harbor. These are not actual or anything. You saw me safe harbor at the beginning, right? Don't take any of it seriously. But I created these in about 5 minutes on some logo site, just to give you an idea that this is where I think we're headed. And what would we do? So that National Defense University is kind of a joint venture of the Department of State and Department of Defense. Big Department of Defense, little contribution from state, but it's still the executive vice president is an ambassador from the State Department. I'm saying that DHS and DoD, with the Cyber Force and the Cyber Corps, should set up a national university of information and cyberspace. Okay, with College of Cybersecurity, a College of Information Influence, a College of Strategically Disruptive Emerging Technology. You can see where we're going. And hey, I think I'm about out of time, and that's about it.
I think NPS will have a few words with you.
What's that?
I think NPS out in San Francisco will have a few words with you.
Everybody, there's a lot of, I have just crashed a bunch of rice balls, right? And I appreciate the attention that you've given me. Hey, I'll tell you one more thing. I was a professor at the Defense Acquisition, people at Defense Acquisition University, proud graduate of the program management course. And in front of the School of Program Management at DSMC, there is a granite monument donated by one of the classes. That was an old semester-long class they had for DoD program managers. Anybody know what is engraved onto that granite monument? Basically, the student said, "You give this as the answer to every question that we have." And so, everything I just said, there's a lot of it depends. But I thank you for your attention. Any last questions before the hope comes and gets me? Sir.
So, Chris Theory this morning said he's a big advocate for what you just said. Right?
Oh, I'm sorry, I did not attend that.
Well, not this one, and the next panel, but another one, maybe not as not as much of an advocate, perhaps, of the services. From what you see and the students that you get, do you think that there is a massive amount of resistance in the services to go in that direction? Or do you think that there might be advocacy for it?
So I think there's less antibodies than there were, right? When I first came to NU several years ago, I was big. I was going to write a big article about this, da 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 da, and oh no, can't possibly. Oh no, and you know, there's a lot of rice bowls, right? I pointed out the antibodies just to have in the College of Information and Cyberspace, like they tried to get rid of it. So, but I think the need, it's you know, without some kind of higher organization, I think we're going to be stagnant. I think we're in a precarious position. You know, I mean, Dreamport. You know, what happens if the sponsor goes away? That thing's going to go away. Look what just happened at DIU, right? So we're having some innovation resistance by some folks, sir.
So something I learned from you. He who owns the purse string dictates the policy.
Ding, 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 ding. You know, I was trying not to be that blunt, but maybe I was more blunt in other things. But yeah, if you don't control the budget, you don't control anything. And somebody just moves it away, and a whole organization could be gone, you know, very, very quickly.
I mean, the only thing that gives CyberCom its teeth is Operation Flash Shield that gives General Article 32 on anyone who has an admin account.
So there's a lot of examples just like that, right? If a patent command has acquisition authority, like SOCOM, they have a lot more power, right? Transcom also is asserted acquisition authority. Cybercom has some acquisition authority, but services have the acquisition authority, right? Services, you know, train equip. Okay.
Okay,
Thanks, sir.
thank you very much, Dr. Schafer.